By something called Loudwire. I'm not big on popular stuff on YouTube, but it sounds like something that's probably pretty popular. Anyway, this is some of the more crazy moments during the Satanic Panic. Now, when I went to school for criminal justice, during the Satanic Panic, you had the merger of Christianity, primarily evangelical Christianity and Catholicism, with law enforcement and with the government, okay? So you had the churches utilizing law enforcement and the FBI, even like federal law enforcement and local government, as a tool to push a certain agenda, and that agenda was that there were Satanists everywhere. There were Satanists behind the mailboxes, Satanists under the doormats. The milkman was a Satanist. The school teachers were Satanists. The principal was a Satanist. The superintendent was a Satanist. The guy that managed the grocery store was a Satanist. Everybody was a Satanist. I mean, even the head of the Catholic school was a Satanist, which is actually funny because the grand jury testimony, the attorney general investigation into the Pennsylvania attorney general investigation into the Catholic Church showed kind of what happened during the Satanic Panic. Most of the people that were committing acts of ritual abuse were Christians. With the investigation into the Catholic Church, they would do things like desecrate the cross and things of that nature. The Catholic priests would do that. And it's funny because it's the very things that they tried to levy against religious Satanists, and the facts are the facts. It just wasn't happening. But I thought this was interesting and humorous, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of what I consider Zeena's best interview ever as a spokesperson for the Church of Satan, but it's also her last interview defending the Church of Satan, but I do think it's her best.
The church of a preacher named Roy Masters.
Come out. No. I won't let her go. No.
Exorcisms of the devil appear just as sincere, far out, and dramatic.
Lost your power. You get out of here.
Now, what you have to understand, a lot of these people, I don't doubt that these people are emotionally disturbed or psychotic or in any ways suffering from some type of emotional trauma or, things of that nature. What I'm very unlikely to believe is that these people are possessed by any type of demonic being, although even if they were possessed by some sort of demonic being, that has absolutely nothing to do with religious Satanism, as you will see in the interview with Zeena that will be coming up.
With a background in show business rather than theology. Show business rather than theology. Indeed, the Army does officially recognize Satanism as a legitimate religion and supplies chaplains with this guide for ministering to the satanic soldier. Some charge that Army bases have become sanctuaries for devil worshippers.
And that's the whole gist of that McMartin daycare scandal horseshit. But let's move on.
Feeding.
666, the sign of the devil. We hear a bloody skull and crossbones.
This is a pentacle. Interesting thing about this pentacle is it's an upright...
Interesting thing about that pentacle is that it's an upright pentacle, which has jack shit to do with religious Satanism. But let's go on.
Pentacle, let me see. It's actually fairly fresh. This is how gangs talk to each other. Okay? But now this...
Do you like his mullet? That's freaking classic.
This is how occultists talk to each other. This here is a psilocybin mushroom. So, probably...
Now, what I want to take note is religious Satanism is against the alteration, well, at least LaVeyan religious Satanism is against the alteration of consciousness or anything that would alter the Satanist's ability to understand reality as reality is. Because of its nature, the way it's it's essentially religious objectivism in a lot of ways. People that know about objectivism or should know about objectivism study Ayn Rand's writings.
They had a psilocybin ritual.
Mike Warnke is a former Satanist. Today he's a successful comedian, preaching Christianity in the form of humor. But back in the 60s, he was one of Satanism's high priests.
The things that you would see in a satanic altar.
He showed us what a satanic temple might resemble, and typical implements used to worship the devil.
Now, what I think's so funny about this, he's allegedly a Satanist. Let me explain this. The Satanic Bible at this point was freely available for over 20 years. People could purchase the Satanic Bible at any bookstore. They could purchase the Satanic Rituals at this point in any bookstore. And they could purchase the Complete Witch, later called the Satanic Witch, at pretty much any bookstore. They could find out what Satanism was all about simply by reading these books. It's not that complex, and it's not what these people are saying Satanism is. This is clearly the distorted imaginations of people that are trying to... It's kind of like people... It's clickbait. It's 1980s clickbait.
Usually are used in a ceremony that calls for telling the future. I have an old 3-inch scar here on my wrist where my friends used to cut my arm open and bleed my blood into a cup. And
divination is very uncommon in satanic circles simply because it's not necessary. In Wicca or other forms of, I guess you'd call it right-hand path magic, a lot of times a divination is performed before you practice magic to find out if you're accidentally going to practice black magic. What's black magic? Black magic is anything that causes personal gain or to harm someone else. But most importantly, what you have to understand is black magic is what is used for personal gain. So anything that causes personal gain, theoretically speaking, if you're into theurgy, would be considered black magic. Whereas white magic is anything that brings you closer to God or closer to your holy guardian angel or things of that nature. What I find interesting is Thelema, the religion of Aleister Crowley, is pure white magic. But people believe it to be black magic for whatever distorted reason they do. But Aleister Crowley's magic, with a K, is essentially white magic because it's all about the great work, all about joining with God, joining with the source of creation, joining through your holy guardian angel with God. And that is the purpose of Thelema. I eventually moved on from Satanism into scientific pantheism, and then after reading the books, Ellen G. White's books and things like that, I started realizing and rediscovering the books of people like Ralph Waldo Emerson and certain people from the New England Transcendentalist movement. I started realizing that joining with God is the actual purpose of magic, and by God I mean nature, and that there are ways to do that, and one of the primary ways is through the 8 laws of health, which I think is perhaps the most direct way of joining with God. And we're going to move forward.
drink it mixed with wine and urine 4 times a year as a ceremony to Satan.
In May of 1982, teenagers...
Listen to that. That is, if that isn't some craziness, I don't know what is.
My friends used to cut my arm open and bleed my blood into a cup and drink it mixed with wine and urine 4 times a year as a ceremony to Satan.
If you're drinking blood mixed with wine and urine, you're not a Satanist, you're a psychotic.
In May of 1982, teenagers of a congregation in Topeka, Kansas, destroyed thousands of dollars worth of records and tapes, which they felt contained the message of Satan. The Christian Concern sheds light on a more secular aspect of music listening. It's what you don't hear.
Certain parts of the men's...
Now, I already did a video about this, how there's a lot of Christians that promote this satanic music, like the lead singer from Slayer is Catholic, Alice Cooper's a born-again Christian. There's a lot of people in the music scene that are Christian. Billy Joel is a Christian. Now, there's not really any Satanists. The closest you can come to a Satanist, I think, would be Jimmy Page, who's a Thelemite. And in Led Zeppelin, there's not many actual Satanists in the music scene. Even Marilyn Manson, who was a Satanist, I don't think he's a Satanist any longer. In fact, I'm waiting for him to come out and say he's a born-again Christian, which would be absolutely hilarious. And what's funny is, what people don't understand, Alice Cooper is actually very good friends with Carla LaVey, the other daughter of the Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey, which a lot of people, she got a lot of flack from that, from the satanic community, but, you know, you can be friends with whoever you want, you know?
Uniforms all accentuate the genitals of a male.
Now notice, this Christian is preoccupied with male genitals.
Uniforms all accentuate the genitals of a male. Faceless creatures in robes that, to me, would, from my study, certainly symbolize druids, which, of course, go back.
And Druidism and Druidry has absolutely not a damn thing to do with Satanism, but let's move on.
To Satan worship. In the blood stains, there is very definitely, without any shadow of a doubt here,
being that Druidism predates any concept of Satan, and that Satan is a Hebrew or an Israelite concept, I find it hard to believe that Druidry would have anything at all to do with Satan, being that it predates the concept of a Satan.
a face of Satan.
Notice he's seeing what he wants to see.
For the purposes of this study, we will focus on the number 666 and its use in the Universal Product Code.
Most people don't realize that 80% of all toys on the market have occultic influence, and these are the most popular.
It says here that it actually makes the wings move, so let me look at that. Isn't that amazing?
Remember those verses in the book of Revelation about the flying beast with the riders on them?
This could actually be taken from Revelations.
You'll notice that they're depicted as blue with black lips.
Well, isn't that interesting?
And you know what happens to you when you die? You turn blue and your lips turn black.
Smurfs has gone occultic.
Very much so.
Smurfs carry a homosexual connotation in that most of them are male.
I believe so.
Snake Mountain, it's got an interesting little feature here. I'm going to turn it on.
This is great. Check this out.
It can actually transform your voice from your regular voice to that of an occultic.
This dude looks like he's having fun with these toys more. It's hilarious.
Hero, is that correct? Let me turn this on here. I think I'm getting it too loud. Skeletor, the master of the universe.
I reverse thread the machine, and I'm going to play that exact piece of tape backwards now. Okay, I live with Satan, exactly. And then you'll hear there's power in Satan.
He will give you 666.
Yeah.
So this is, I feel, perhaps the best interview with Zeena as High Priestess of the Church of Satan. And I think the main reason why, is she was actually allowed to speak. So let's move on, and let's listen to Zeena speak.
Meet with the High Priestess of the Church of Satan. Stand by. This is Midday Sunday, and our guest is Zeena LaVey, High Priestess of the Church of Satan and daughter of its founder, Anton LaVey. The question that I would bet most people are asking themselves right now is, how can anyone worship the devil?
Yes, that is a common misconception. And we have to state once and for all that we really don't worship the devil. We don't believe in any outside deities, whether they be God or Satan, and that we don't believe in the anthropomorphic, literal deity of a Satan. We feel that Satan represents a certain kind of energy force. If you were to take radioactivity or electricity and give them the name Satan, maybe that makes it a little more easy to understand. Electricity, for example, was considered a very satanic thing when it was first discovered and utilized. And ironically, Benjamin Franklin, who was a member of the Hellfire Club and considered himself a Satanist, was one of the people who began that journey into exploring electricity, and we feel that we are conductors of that force that we call Satan.
You then would also recognize a force that would be something like what Christians or Jews would refer to as God?
Well, we feel we are our own gods. We feel that whatever God or devil we want to believe in comes from within us, in the same way that we feel that whatever heaven or hell there is, it's here right now on earth, and it's what we make of it.
Now, this is one of the inconsistencies with Satanism, but it's only inconsistent in the sense that Anton LaVey didn't do a good enough job defining this. See, in the Satanic Bible, under the header, Want It God, Dead or Alive, what Anton LaVey explains is that God exists. Okay? God is the balance factor in nature. However, there's also, in another part, where it says, the God you save may be yourself, explains how people create gods out of their own psyches, out of their own emotional nonsense, and gods, whether it's Zeus is a fine example of a god that can do every naughty thing that people can't do. Have sex with whoever he wants, eat whatever he wants, behave however he wants, whereas humanity can't do that. And I think that he should have more clearly defined these things. But the Satanic Bible, if you read the Satanic Bible, it's a fairly decent book, okay? But the thing is, it looks like a pretty badly sewn together patchwork, but I do think that Zeena, and Zeena primarily, really almost saved Satanism by turning it into something else, by mixing it with Nordic and Germanic occult influences and things of that nature. And it really, she worked in the 1980s and early 90s and almost turned it into something very cohesive and very good. Unfortunately, it never really stuck, and she did eventually become a Setian, and then eventually from there she became a Tibetan Buddhist. But I'll let her continue, because in the sense we are our own gods, in the sense, and this is taken from the Ptolemaic idea that every man and every woman is a star, or every man and every woman is a god. LaVey deals with this and clarifies this a bit more in The Satanic Witch, or The Complete Witch, where he explains how stars are of varying brightness, meaning gods are of varying degrees of importance. Just because you're a god does not mean you're the same god as, say, someone else. And this goes under, there's concepts like water finds its own level, blah, 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 blah. Different little slogans in Satanism that help explain the philosophy of Satanism rather than a concise and cohesive philosophy. But let's let Zeena speak a little more here.
We don't believe that when you die you go to heaven or hell. We just believe that when you die you're dead. And it's a very self-indulgent, for the here and now type of philosophy. But we also believe in magic, which is the use of this force that we call Satan, as I was saying.
One of the things that disappointed me about Satanism and what got me to become a scientific pantheist was the lack of carnality and the sort of cerebral masturbation that took place in Satanism. See, Satanism is a very here and now kind of religion. And when I discovered the writings of Ellen G. White, I realized, Seventh-day Adventists are more concerned about carnality and the flesh and the health of the flesh than are Satanists. And it's very interesting, but let's go on.
And the manipulation of that.
People tend to equate anything referring to Satan, the devil, anything like that, with evil.
Right. Yeah. Well, throughout history, there have always been things like vampires, werewolves, witches. These are all names of different things that have been considered evil. And if you examine these various things, they're people who simply did not conform to whatever the mainstream was. And we are the living examples of what we are what has descended from people who are called werewolves, vampires, witches, and we are Satanists, and we do represent the very things that the average mind would consider dangerous or would consider evil or frightening, simply because we question everything. We don't settle for answers that are just thrown at us as the Judeo-Christian philosophy would have you want to do.
You talk about living for the here and now? Talk to us about that. What does that involve?
Basically, I mean, we feel that everything that comes to us in our life is based on something that we do to gain that. We can't pray to any outside deity for anything good or bad to happen. If we want something to happen in our favor, we have to take the necessary steps to do it. We can't rely on anyone else. In the same way that we don't believe in redemption, we don't believe that people can be saved, we don't believe people can be converted. And we also believe that we are born this way. A Satanist is born. They aren't converted, they aren't made, they're just born that way. In the same way that we would feel criminals are born criminals, that you can't reform someone. That, I mean, in a satanic society, there would be no, rehabilitation programs, because we simply don't believe in that. And it would be, we would have a much stricter type of law and order system.
So many people, though, especially here in the United States, in Christianity, they rely on religion to bring them a sense of comfort, that there is something beyond this realm.
Right.
That doesn't exist in Satan.
Well, we find comfort in ourselves. The whole idea of looking to some source, it doesn't necessarily have to be Judeo-Christianity. The average person these days looks to the television for comfort. And we liken the television to the new God or Christ or whatever you want to call it. And we would say that the media now is that comfort source for what might be the more ignorant of our society. And what Satanists are experiencing now is the result of that ignorance and what that God has created for those ignorant people. Now, we are somewhat at war or at battle with ignorance. And I won't call it Judeo-Christianity, because that's not only what it's confined to. There are a lot of atheists that are equally as dangerous as far as we're concerned.
Exactly.
And what we're finding is that we are the last scapegoat. We're the last minority. We're the last religion that always requires somebody else to define what we are. If you interviewed a Buddhist, you wouldn't have someone from law enforcement there to say, well, now Buddhism isn't really, I don't know, we've been checking into Buddhism. But with a Satanist, we have to have experts. Law enforcement, animal control, child abuse centers. We're the only religion now where it's required that somebody else defines what we are, and that our word isn't good enough to just define what we are. And we're also the last scapegoat. We're the only thing that the media, whether it's television, papers, books, can toss our name around, which is Satanist or Satanism, indiscriminately, with no regard for whose lives it affects.
And I would say this is now
many
not just
Satanists'
Satanists.
lives and their families have been completely destroyed or upheaved, and it's because of this ignorance.
White people have become the last scapegoat at
We have
this
got
point.
so much territory to cover.
White people
We
have
to take a
taken the
break.
place of
We'll be
Satan.
right back.
White people are the ones that can have their names thrown around and be trampled, etc.
This is Midday Sunday. Our guest this morning is Zeena LaVey, High Priestess of the Church of Satan. We were talking about the church being one of the last scapegoats, and we should note that Pat Matoyer, detective with Los Angeles Police Department's Criminal Conspiracy Unit, who is the department's expert on cults and religions, has consistently said that the department does not investigate crimes on the basis of religion.
That's right. He says that if there's a murder, they investigate it as only a murder, not a Christian murder, not a Jewish murder, not a satanic murder. If there's a car robbery, they investigate it in that way also.
Yet, for the most part throughout this country, you're accused of murders, Satanists are accused of murders and animal sacrifices.
Right.
Set us straight.
Well, obviously, I mean, without a doubt, we have nothing to do with that. We are as I've stated, a self-indulgent philosophy, but there's a difference between self-indulgence and compulsion. And also, as far as animals go, animals are an important part of our lives. They are our familiars. If you look at Satanism throughout history, we have always been in league with animals, a part of animals. We are animals ourselves. We feel that we are more linked to the animals that walk on all fours than the average person is. And that also means that we are much more instinctual, and we go by intuition a lot more.
You talk about being self-indulgent. What does that mean?
Well, to give you an example, everyone thinks we, would support heavy metal music just because that must be satanic. But on the contrary, we feel that it's destructive and that it's not pleasing aesthetically. It's just not right. So, to give you an example of what we would consider self-indulgent, most Satanists, I can say, listen to classical music, would listen to Wagner or Liszt or Beethoven, something that would be pleasing and pleasurable rather than accosting your senses. And we also feel that a lot of the lyrics in heavy metal music is not at all satanic, and if you really listen to them, they're more in fear of Satan than satanic or pro-Satan, and they're also very self-destructive. Again, we feel that taking drugs is just a form of self-destruction, and we feel that our lives and being alive is the greatest indulgence. Therefore, we would never put our lives in jeopardy because we want to maintain our lives as much as possible. Death is the great abstinence, and we feel that anything that would speed up the death process is, in fact, a more Judeo-Christian idea than satanic, because we are for the here and now and for our living spirit. We want that to, be on this earth as long as possible.
One of the criticisms involves sex.
Right. Sex, we feel, is completely up to the individual. Everyone has sex, or maybe, no, I shouldn't say everyone has sex, but some people don't. But we feel that that's completely up to the individual. Whatever fetishes a person has, if they're carried out in a healthy and controlled way, then that's within our guidelines. But what we do not encourage is for people to suppress whatever fetishes they may have, because we feel that bottles them up and they become destructive to people that they actually care about or people they work with or whatever. But that doesn't mean, then someone might say, oh, well, then you must encourage pedophilia, which is one of the
issue has been raised.
Right, of course, and that's one of the most ridiculous things, along with animal sacrifice, that's been hurled towards us. And, in the book that we all live by, which is the Satanic Bible, it clearly states that children and animals we hold in the highest regard. These are sacred things to us, much the same way that Jehovah, or whatever God you want to call it, is sacred to those people. Now, to defile what we consider to be sacred, these other people have to understand would be the same as being blasphemous to what they consider sacred.
As I listen to you, I'm reminded again and again of the contrasts. So many other religions we have to suffer here on earth.
Right.
Sex is something that we abstain from, except under certain limited circumstances. How do you get across to people who are unfamiliar with your beliefs that your beliefs can coexist with theirs?
Well, I don't really believe they can coexist with us.
Okay.
As you were saying in the introduction, that this is a melting pot of different philosophies and religions, we really don't feel that they can coexist, and we would much prefer to have our own space and be left alone. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can't be a Satanist. Without Christianity, you couldn't be a Satanist. Well, that's not true at all. We would still be just the way we are, except without the harassment that we have been faced with. However, Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, would take a nosedive without somebody to point the blame at, without some scapegoat, without somebody to say, if you don't stay within our boundaries, within our rules, then this is what you'll become, or this is where you'll go. And it all comes down to fear. We have no fear. We have no fear of that if we die, we're going to go somewhere that is unpleasant, because we know, we study, and we know that this is what we have to deal with. And we are very rational in our day-to-day life.
You mentioned earlier that you don't pray in the same sense that others might pray,
right,
but you have magic.
Right. Now, I would say that's probably maybe the one irrational thing that we do have. And every religion must have one irrational thing. And that is the one thing that people say, well, if you're so rational, then how can you believe in magic? The only way I can explain that is it's been tried and true, is that we know that it's the power of our mind that creates change in our lives. We know that
take note
if
also
you
of the power
focus
of
your attention
positive
on any
thinking
certain thing,
by
then you believe
Norman Vincent
completely that you
Peale.
will have that. We know that it's the power of our mind that creates change in our lives. We know that if you focus your attention on any certain thing and you believe completely that you will have that, we know you will, but it has to be a blind and true understanding that you will have this, whatever the this is that you want, in the same way that people would blindly look to an outside deity. We know that it's our minds that are controlling the change in our lives, and that is what's considered satanic by all the other religions, is because we are taking control of our own bodies. We are doing whatever we want, and knowing full well that it's us that's causing the change in our lives and not someone else.
We'll be right back. We'll talk about some more magic. We're wrapping up Midday Sunday today with the High Priestess of the Church of Satan, Zeena LaVey. People with a Christian Judeo background, if they have a sick friend, they would pray for them.
Right.
A Satanist, what would they do?
Well, provided that the friend is someone that we, first of all, care enough about, which we would only perform a ritual in the instance that it's someone that we loved and cared about very deeply. Then we would use whatever strength and energies that we had to transfer over to that person. If someone was sick, very ill, we would take all of the energy that we had in our bodies and in our mind and direct it towards that person, and we would, in a way, have to feel what that person was feeling to transfer our energies to them. We would have to
Read the
understand
Silva
and
mind
realize
control method.
realistically what that person was faced with, and that would be the way we would deal with that.
There are some parallels with that and some of the Eastern religions, for example. But going beyond that, we talked earlier about freedom of religion in this country. You folks have been persecuted, haven't
Yes, we have. You have to understand that this is a witch hunt in the classic sense.
you? Even though you are not witches. Let's
Well, not
clarify
per
that.
se. We have witches within our organization. We feel that witches are an old word for what we would consider Satanists to be. Just like I was saying werewolves and vampires might be.
But going beyond that, the witch hunt, as you call it.
This is the same thing that's going on now that was going on during the McCarthy era. And it's been interesting because it has, for us, weeded out the weak from the strong within our own organization, in our own ranks. We now see the people who it's worth it. Their religion is worth it to stick their noses out and to stand up and speak out. For 5 years now I've been doing this. I've been trying to defend my beliefs. And I've seen many people within our own organization who just smugly sit back and watch the TV in their easy chairs and say, oh, well, I'll wait till things smooth out and then I'll come out and I'll be the one that takes the bows for all of this that they're doing. Well, we are beginning to see who the real Satanists are as well. But aside from that, we have definitely been persecuted, and unfairly. There are laws that they try to pass where they use Satanism as a reason to pass these laws. So there is no separation between church and state.
Exactly.
Our children have to suffer going to school if they're wearing a Baphomet, if they're dressed in black, if there's any indication that they might be a Satanist. Some of our children can't go to private schools because once it's known that they're a Satanist, the director says, no, I'm sorry, the other children's parents will complain and I'll lose money.
What do you say to a child who comes home from school, perhaps crying, saying, Mommy, I don't want to be a Satanist, or they're making fun of me?
Well, that hasn't happened so much that they would say, I don't want to be a Satanist. They come home crying and they say, why are people so stupid? They say, my son will come home and he'll say, I can't believe how stupid these other kids are. And it makes him want to be more of a separatist than want to get along with the people that he knows that he can't explain anything to. And it stems from their parents.
We have seen in this country some commingling of church and state, at least philosophically.
Right.
So let's try some questions. Abortion. Where do Satanists stand on abortion?
Abortion is a very touchy subject because I personally believe that it's a very difficult subject to address. We would ordinarily feel that that's up to the individual. However, if abortion is used as an out, as a means of birth control, then we don't feel that that's healthy or right. I had my son when I was 14 years old. I chose to not have an abortion. My parents supported me at age 14, which I can say the majority of the country would not support their children if they were 13 or 14 got pregnant.
The death penalty.
The death penalty, we would be in favor of the death penalty because we feel that if society really knew what would happen to them if they did screw up, then there would be a lot more, at least mental enforcement to not do that. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, if you're a thief, you have your hands chopped off. We feel that the punishment should fit the crime.
We have about 1 minute left. What final thoughts would you like to leave with people who are watching us this morning and shaking their heads?
Well, the final thought I would like to leave is that we are not going to be their scapegoats anymore, that we are the last minority, but we are not going away. The Church of Satan is approaching its 25th anniversary. We're having a public event, the first public ritual since probably 72, to celebrate the year 25 of the Satanic Age. We're not going away. We're here. You might not see us. You might not know that your coworker is a Satanist, but we are not going away, and we are not going to put up with the accusations that have been hurled towards us.
But are you an enemy?
We are only an enemy mentally. It's all in their minds. If they want to see us as an enemy, then we are that enemy. We are against ignorance. We feel that you have to educate yourself, no matter what the situation is. And people who refuse to educate themselves, people who refuse to find out what something is about that they're frightened of, find comfort in being ignorant.
Thank you for educating us this morning. Zeena LaVey, High Priestess of the Church of Satan. That's our program for this Sunday morning. For all of us here at KTTV, Channel 11, Fox Television.
We're going to talk about that's all for this video.